The paper in the International Journal of Occupational and Environmental Health looks like a standard dry scientific paper, but there's a very interesting story that it tells. It's about a carcinogen, 4-methylimidazole, and it's a substance that's been of concern probably for 40 years. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, there were concerns about it causing cancer and probably behavioral effects, but nothing happened for many years. Then, in the last 7 or 8 years, the United States National Toxicology Program did a high-quality study in rats and mice and demonstrated quite clearly that 4-methylimidazole is a carcinogen. It caused lung tumors in mice, caused probably leukemia in rats, and also some other toxicities in rats. Now, what makes this particularly interesting is that 4-methylimidazole is a contaminant in certain caramel colorings, particularly the caramel colorings that are very widely used in soft drinks, cola beverages in particular. And so beverages like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola had quite high levels of this 4-methylimidazole. The state of California has regulations that limit the amount of a carcinogen in a food product or any other commercial product. And if a product contains more than a certain level of a carcinogen, the amount that would cause cancer in 1 out of 100,000 people, the manufacturer has to put a warning label saying something like the state of California considers this a carcinogen. So the state of California told the soft drink industry, and I guess the caramel manufacturers, that soft drinks contain much higher levels than would be permitted under California law without that warning notice. So for the next few years, this is probably 2008, 2009, 2010, the industry fought off the state of California, bringing in fancy academics and industrial scientists to argue that not only was 4-methylimidazole not a carcinogen, but it actually prevented cancer. And the state of California rejected that argument, as we describe in the paper in IJOEH. 2 years ago, California finalized its regulations and said that you had to limit the amount of carcinogen, and the regulations went into effect, I think, in early 2012. And lo and behold, no warning notices on Coke and Pepsi. Why? Because the manufacturers were able to get a caramel coloring that had a much lower level, probably 1/10 as much 4-methylimidazole as the beverages contained a year or two earlier. And that enabled the companies to avoid putting warning labels on. And I think one lesson from this is that regulatory or some kind of legal pressure on industry can often get the industries to do the impossible, or the things they said were impossible before the regulators went after them. So the soft drink manufacturers probably told the caramel coloring industry, you better shape up. If we're going to use caramel coloring, you've got to cut the amount of carcinogen. And so at least one company, D.D. Williamson, apparently came out with a much less contaminated carcinogen that met the California strictures. Now, the only place it was used was in California. And the Center for Science in the Public Interest, my organization, did a study of Coca-Cola from different places in the United States and around the world. And some of these products had far more. Brazil was the most contaminated, had the most contaminated product. And people have to read the paper to see how much 4-methylimidazole was in Coca-Cola in other countries. Coke says it's going to use the less contaminated caramel coloring throughout the United States. I haven't heard them say throughout the world, but I suspect that's going to happen. And hopefully regulatory agencies in the United Kingdom, Brazil, China, Japan, everywhere that Coca-Cola is sold, will require Coca-Cola and other companies to have much lower levels of 4-methylimidazole. Well, as I said, the new Coca-Cola and the new caramel coloring complies with the law in California, no warning notice. But the United States Food and Drug Administration has a tighter limit on carcinogens than the state of California, 10 times as tight. California allows carcinogens if they cause cancer in fewer than 1 out of 100,000 people. The Food and Drug Administration says that companies cannot market products that contain a contaminant that causes cancer in more than 1 out of 1,000,000 people. And these soft drinks, the amount of 4-methylimidazole exceeds that level that the FDA would allow, assuming people drink about 350 milliliters a day. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. The Food and Drug Administration shows no real concern, no real interest in regulating, hoping that the companies will bring levels down low enough so it doesn't have to regulate. And I haven't seen any interest in any other country in forcing the companies to remove this carcinogen from their products. And we shall see what happens. But kind of the take-home message is that basic research did its job, demonstrated that 4-methylimidazole is a carcinogen, and then action by California Center for Science and the Public Interest, the news media, forced these huge companies to change their products, make them safe. At least from the point of view of 4-methylimidazole, they're still loaded with sugar that's going to cause obesity and heart disease and gout and all kinds of other problems. So that's another topic for another day.